those of you, as I was saying before, it's quality, not quantity. I'm very glad to see you all. Thank you very much for coming along to find out about honours and postgraduate study at the School of Psychological Sciences at the Australian College of Applied Psychology. My name is Catherine Nicholson-Perry. I'm an associate professor in the department. That still seems impressive. I've impressed myself. Where I'm the coordinator of the postgraduate program. For any of you who don't know, we're located in the central CBD in Sydney, just above Wigan Station. Yeah, which makes travel really easy. In terms of psychology at ACAP, the School of Psychological Sciences is a relative baby compared to the duration that the institution has been around. It was established in 2009. And it was the first non-university higher education provider to be recognised by the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council. And the Australian Psychology Accreditation Council, also known as ACAP, are the body who are responsible for accrediting psychology degrees in Australia. So we had our first intake of the sort of years 1 to 4 courses in 2011. Including the B Psych Science, the Grad Dip Psych Science, the B Psych Science, and we also had on the books the Graduate Diploma of Psychology, which was an alternative fourth year, but we've never actually had an intake come into that group. And subsequently in 2012 we had our first intake of postgraduate courses leading to registration, those being the Graduate Diploma of Professional Psychology, known as the GDPP, and the Master of Psychology, known as the MPC. And it's a little quote from the Accreditation Council after their visit to see us. They come and spend a couple of days with us and interview everybody and look at what we get up to. You can't hide anything from them. They have eyes in the back of their heads. So just to give you a bit of an understanding of where the honours and the postgrad programs fit in here, I'm hoping this will be a light. Yes, it is, but it doesn't want to stay on. Never mind. I'll come over the point. So basically, you probably, how many of you are in sort of years 1 to 3 at the moment of a psych degree? Most of you. Okay, all right, so we'll start down here. So initially on the pathway to becoming a registered psychologist, it's actually a 6-year course of study to become a psychologist, whichever way you do it. Most people start out in a 3-year undergraduate program, similar to the ones that you're doing at the moment. Or if you've already got an undergraduate degree, you can also do what's called a Graduate Diploma of Psych Science, where you do the psychology units in a kind of an intensive fashion. Then you have to do what's called a 4th-year course. So there are a number of different sorts of courses, most commonly honours programs, and we only offer an honours program at the moment at ACAP, but other APAC accredited 4th-year programs are also available. Once you've got past the kind of bar of the 4th-year sequence of courses, then you get into programs that are kind of directly related to becoming a registered psychologist. So that's not the only thing you can do with a psychology degree, obviously. You can go and work in a non-psychological area, you can go down a kind of academic or research route, but I'm mainly going to focus today on professional psychology training. And there are a number of different ways in which you can complete what's called your 5th and 6th year sequence. The first of which is 2 years of Psychology Board of Australia approved supervised experience. And I know some of the folk who were at the expo today offer those kind of programs. Then there are academic courses. The first of which is what's called a 5+1 program, where you do a year of academic study. But sometimes they're called master's programs, sometimes they're called graduate diploma programs. Ours is called graduate diploma. But basically that gives you a year of intensive study, a small amount of clinical kind of work with people. Sometimes in some institutions that's simulated, in our institution it's actually with real people in our psychology clinic. And then once you've finished that course, you go on to do a 1-year Psychology Board of Australia approved period of supervised practice, and then that gives you the basis on which you can become a registered psychologist. Another option is to do a 2-year APAC recognised professional master's program, and we offer one of these at just keep trying to almost fall back into saying UWS. I used to work at UWS and I'm just like, this is just almost coming out of my mouth. UWS do also do that, but mind yourself, you just talk about APAC. So you can do the 2-year program, and that gives you the basis for registration. And then some institutions offer doctoral programs, either a professional doctorate or a PhD with coursework, but that's not something that we currently offer at ACAP. So all of those different routes, so you can see there are lots of different ways you can get there, all of those different routes provide you with the basis for registration as a psychologist. So, as I said before, APAC is responsible for accrediting, specifically accrediting psychology courses, but the psychology degrees offered at ACAP have also been assessed by generic accrediting bodies. So initially by the New South Wales Department of Education and Training. We're currently just had our undergraduate programs re-accredited by TEXA, and we're in the process of doing the postgraduate programs at the moment. APAC itself, and then for clinical training programs, they also have to be reviewed by the Australian Psychological Society's College of Clinical Psychologists, and they basically look at them to make sure they've got the right sort of clinical content in the training. And so our courses have been reviewed by all of those bodies. And they're judged against the same standards that are used to accredit any psychology course across Australia, Hong Kong, Malaysia and Singapore. And when they come and look at the courses and to make sure that they're kind of okay, they look at things like the curriculum, they look at the staff, they come and look at the facilities to make sure you've kind of got decent space and good services for students, etc. So there's a high bar, and anyone offering an accredited course has to have passed that bar. And we have, all of our courses are recognised by ACAP, and they're also recognised by the Psychology Board of Australia for the purposes of becoming registered as a psychologist. If you look at the APAC website at the moment, you'll notice that the postgraduate courses are currently listed on there as accredited with conditions. And that was because in order to get full registration, you have to actually have had students graduate from the courses that you run. So we only had our first group of students start in 2012. The first lot graduated at the end of 2014. And then we were re-accredited this year. We're just waiting for the outcome of that. So that'll be updated on the website pretty soon. So let's talk a little bit about the Bachelor of Psychological Sciences Honours. So this is our 4th year programme. It offers you a 4th year of accredited study in psychology. It can be done on a 1-year full-time basis or 2 years part-time. It's offered on the Sydney and Melbourne campuses, and it's basically for people who have already completed an accredited 3-year sequence in psychology at any institution, or the equivalent if it's been assessed by the Australian Psychological Society as an overseas sequence, which is the equivalent of the 3-year sequence. The entry requirements include that you've completed an Australian Psychology Accreditation Council accredited 3-year sequence within the last 10 years. So that's just to make sure that your kind of knowledge is up to date. We want you to kind of be coming in with up-to-date knowledge to come in to do this course. And you need to have a credit average in 2nd and 3rd year units, including a credit in the majority of psychology units. So you'll be familiar with the sort of 3-year program that people often do a mix of units. You've got to do psychology ones obviously to get a psychology degree, but you might do some other units from other areas as well. But what we're really interested in is what grade you got for the core psychology units. You were going to ask a question.
I was just going to ask, are you going to put a lot of emphasis on the electives? So are you going to look at our GPA in general, or you're just focusing on those?
We will look overall, but what really matters is the core psych units. Yeah. So if you did, I don't know, beginner's Japanese or something, and you got a 51, we're not going to be worried about that. We're going to be worried about what you got for, psychopathology or learning and cognition or whatever it happens to be. So the coursework that's involved in the honours program covers the discipline of psychology and introduces you to some of the specialties of psychology in the profession. So things like clinical psychology and community psychology, for example. Oh, that's interesting. We only have one intake a year into the honours program, and that's in February. And you also do a supervised research project. So we deliver the course in a number of different modalities. That includes lectures, seminars, doing laboratory work as part of your coursework. And for the research project, you're allocated to an individual supervisor. We'll talk a bit about how that happens in a minute, who works with you over the course of the year on your developing your project and implementing it, and then the process of writing it up. So for full-time students, these are the sorts of subjects that you would be doing. In term 1, you'd be doing a unit about the evidence base of the discipline. You'd be starting your research thesis by putting together your research proposal, doing a presentation on that, and doing an ethics application if that's a requirement. In term 2, you'd be looking at the issues around advanced psychological assessment and continuing with your thesis, for example, collecting data and writing a literature review. And in the final term, you do a unit that we call advanced special topics. So we usually have a range of speakers both from within the faculty and outside of the school who come and talk about particular topics of interest to the profession of psychology. And you complete your thesis. You do a presentation at the Psychology Research Day, which we hold every year, to give you experience of kind of delivering information about your research to your peers and the staff and anyone else who's interested and wants to come along. For part-time students, you can see that we kind of split it up. So you do all the coursework over 1 year, just a unit a term, and then you do all the research over the second year, so you're finished after 2 years of part-time enrolment. So in terms of admission to the program, applications for entry into the honours program for 2016 close on October the 31st, Halloween. That's not a mistake, it's a pretty scary day for all concerned. We then look at all of the applications and we make first round offers around December 2015 and second round offers at the end of January 2016. We invite everyone along to an orientation morning, which next year will be the 4th of February, where you have the opportunity to, I think this is the next one, you have the opportunity to meet the people who are involved in the course. You get introduced to all the faculty who are offering supervision for research projects. They will talk about what they do in terms of research, what they can be useful to you in relation to, and then you can speak to supervisors as well to get a bit more of an idea. And then you complete and submit your supervisor preference form. Basically, you select 3 people who you think you'd like to work with and 3 areas that you think you might like to do your research in. And then my colleague, who's the course coordinator, Fiona Paps, has the joy of sitting down and trying to match it all up in terms of supervisors, projects and students. If you want to have a little look, if you're thinking about applying and you want to have a look and see what kinds of research we do and who the staff are, you can have a look at that on our website, and there's sort of photos of the usual suspects down there of some of the people that we have. Even if you're based in Sydney, you can still be supervised potentially by a supervisor on the Melbourne campus. We just use Skype for you to be able to kind of communicate with each other. So, it's also potentially possible to have honours program research supervised by members of the postgraduate program team as well. I think that's probably slightly more detail than we need. So that's kind of an overview of the honours program, and for those of you who we didn't speak to earlier on, we're running a webinar in October. There's going to be a presentation online about the programs that we offer. There'll be one on the honours program and there'll be one on the postgrad programs, very similar to what I'm talking about today, that you can kind of look at your leisure. And then we'll be having a webinar where you can ask questions of the course coordinators if you want to. So just keep your eyes peeled for that if you would like to do that. And we can certainly, if you haven't already given us your details, we can take your details and send you an invitation to that if you're interested. So we'll move on from honours now to talk about the postgraduate pathways to registration at ACAP. So these are what's called the 5th and 6th year courses, so the last couple of years of training that you do prior to becoming registered as a psychologist. And we offer 2 courses that are part of that pathway. The first is the 5th year course, the Graduate Diploma in Professional Psychology, and the second, the Master in Clinical Psychology, which is the 5th and 6th year course. And again, we only have 1 entry per year, which is in the first trimester of the year. And as I mentioned before, these courses are currently only offered on the Sydney campus and only offered as an on-campus offering. They're not offered as an online delivery option. So let's talk about the Graduate Diploma or GDPP course first of all. So this is recognised as a 5th year of professional training, and with an additional 1 year cyber, that's the acronym for the Psychology Board of Australia, approved internship, then that comprises the 5th and 6th years of training that you need for general registration. Just to give you a little bit of information, it's probably more than you need at the moment, but the internship year requires about 1,540 years. 1,500 just feels like 1,540 years. 1,540 hours of supervised work, which includes 1,400 hours of supervised practice, including 560 hours of direct face-to-face contact with clients, 80 hours of supervision and 60 hours of professional development. And there's more information on the cyber website if you want to have a little look at what that involves. And this is about general psychology training, so it could be work that you're doing in a school, or it could be work that you're doing job capacity assessments. It could be a whole kind of blend of different sorts of things. It's not necessarily just in mental health, for example, as you would generally tend to find doing a clinical degree. One of the features of our course is that, unlike many of the other fifth year courses, which are kind of bigger scale, they have larger intakes, we have quite a small intake into our GDPP course. They do pretty much the same taught curriculum as our master's students, and they do the same clinical work in our clinic as our master's students. And if they obtain a distinction average over the coursework units, then they can apply to the master's program for entry with credit transfer. So there are a couple of units where you have to do some additional assessments just to demonstrate that you're across some of the information that the clinical students would have had in addition, but it's something that we don't think is on offer in any of the other fifth year courses across Australia. So in terms of the content of the course, the vast majority of it is coursework. About 71% of credit points relate to coursework, and about 29% relate to supervised clinical practice. And that supervised clinical practice is basically 3 hours of professional practice in the ACAP clinic. The ACAP psychology clinic is based at Wynyard, and we offer neuropsychological assessments, we run group programs, and we do individual assessment and treatment there. And students work in the clinic under supervision in trimesters 2 and 3 of their courses. So this is the course sequence for the GDPP. Basically, got in the first 2 trimesters, you've got 3 predominantly coursework units. The first trimester is really getting all of the information under your belt that you need to be able to start doing the clinical practice. So counselling, communication, culture, psychology, health and wellbeing, and psychological assessment unit. In trimester 2, you carry on doing some purely coursework units, so lifespan psychology. It's split up into 2 units, one for adulthood and older adults, and the other one for children and adolescents. And then the third unit in that trimester, psychology practice 1, is where you start doing your supervised clinical practice. You do 100 hours of contact of professional practice in that unit, as well as attending seminars looking at ethical, legal and professional issues in psychology. And the final trimester of the year, you're spending the vast majority of your time basically doing supervised clinical practice. You do 200 hours of practice in that final trimester, as well as the research methods unit. And the purpose of the research methods unit is really to help you to kind of think about the way in which you can use research or your understanding of research to help guide your professional practice in the long term. Okay, so now on to the Master of Psychology, or MPC. So this is, as I mentioned before, a recognised 5th and 6th year, so it runs in parallel to the GDPP. The GDPP, you get the 5th year content. In the Master's programme, the whole thing's rolled together, so we're delivering for you the whole of the 2 years that you need for registration. It also provides what's called a pathway to endorsement in clinical psychology area of practice. So in terms of registration in psychology in Australia, everyone has to have what's called general registration, and then there are some what's called areas of endorsement, which relate to particular areas of expertise that people with that area of endorsement have. That includes things like clinical psychology, forensic psychology, organisational psychology. We only offer a clinical psychology program, and basically you want to be endorsed in clinical psychology, you have to make sure that your years 5 and 6 training are clinical psychology. If you want to be an organisational psychologist, you need to make sure you do the organisational master's. And I'm sure it will fill you with joy to know that once you finish your clinical masters, you have to do another 2 years of supervised practice in order to get to the point of being endorsed in clinical psychology. But you can at least be having someone pay you to do that, so, you know, hooray. That involves effectively the equivalent of 2 years full-time work, over 3,000 hours of psychology practice, 80 hours of supervision, and 80 hours of professional development. So going back to the question of the entry requirements for the Master of Psychology, that includes a 4-year ACAP accredited sequence in psychology, completed in the last 10 years, and the accreditation board requires that that's the equivalent of a 2-1. So, grade 1 average of 6 if you're doing your undergrad here. And that's a requirement of the accreditation body, so we don't have discretion. And it differs from the GDPP, where there's no minimum requirement. Although I should say that in reality, it's very unusual for anyone with less than a 2-1 to get offered a place in the GDPP, because the competition is generally so fierce. So don't see that as something to aim for, see it as something proceed if you possibly can. And you also need to be eligible for registration as a provisional psychologist, so the same things apply in relation to criminal checks, etc., or already be currently registered as a psychologist and have kept your CPD, have continued to meet your CPD requirements over that period. The content of the course is a bit different in terms of balance to the GDPP course. You're doing the same amount of coursework, but as a proportion overall it's smaller, so just under half of the total content of the course is coursework, about a third of it is supervised clinical practice, and about, this doesn't quite add up in terms of numbers, a quarter of it is a research project. The first year, the majority of what you're doing is coursework. You get a bit of an introduction to professional practice, and you begin, we basically do our research thesis over 4 trimesters. You start in the last trimester of your 5th year. And in year 2, you do relatively little coursework. Predominantly, you're spending your time doing professional practice. You do 700 hours of supervised professional practice in that year. And that's usually with external placement agencies. So that might be in a private hospital or a psychology clinic or a research psychology unit, for example. And you continue to work on and complete your research thesis, which gets submitted in the 3rd trimester of the year. So in terms of the course sequence, you'll notice that the names of the units are very similar to the ones that I put up for the GDPP. So basically, these 3 are identical to the one that you would do if you were doing the graduate diploma program. This unit is identical to the one you'd be doing if you did the graduate diploma program. These 2 are slightly different because the 5th year, the GDPP program is for general training, whereas this is for clinical psychology training. So there's more of an emphasis on diagnosis and formulation and treatment of mental health conditions than in the GDPP version of them. And then you have in trimester 3, everyone does the common research methods unit, everyone does the common psychology practice unit. But in addition to what the GDPP students are doing, the master's students may start on a research project in that trimester as well. And in the 2nd year, in the 1st trimester, you have the last remaining kind of true coursework unit, which is human neuropsychology and neuropsychiatric disorders. And then through the rest of the year, basically, you do a research project unit each trimester, and you do a professional practice placement unit each trimester as well. Until at the end of the year, you drag yourself like a lived version of the person you were when you started over the finish line, finally complete your degree. Okay. So, in terms of applications for trimester 1 2016, again for the GDPP, the applications close on the 31st of October, and you can see the ACAP website for details. We can't accept late applications, and that means that everything you need to submit if you're submitting for the postgrad programs needs to be received by the 31st of the 10th. That includes completing the online application form. We also collect referee reports from people that you nominate, and we undertake interviews with shortlisted candidates in the beginning of December, and then make 1st round offers usually by Christmas that year, and then subsequently into the new year, depending on what sort of responses we get to the 1st round offers. And as I mentioned before, the Bachelor of Psychological Science Honours Programme application, the same application form is available on the ACAP website. You might be wondering about fees, so just to let you know that fees are basically paid term by term, and you can make use of fee help in the same way that you can in universities. A government loan, obviously a government loan scheme set up to help pay part or all of your domestic, your tuition fees if you're a domestic student, and you repay it through the tax system when your income reaches that threshold. And just, a note that your eligibility is not affected by income or assets, and there's a link to a website there that you can have a look at. Find out more information about that. You're probably quite familiar with it by now, I imagine. If you need any help with your application, we have got a raft of very expert student recruitment officers who are very happy to try and help you. They've usually answered the same questions before, and if they haven't, then they come to someone like me and they find out what the answer is. So they're the first port of call, and you can find out you can make an inquiry through the URL that I've popped up there. And now, what I would like to do is just invite, I've got a couple of students who are studying in the postgrad programs at the moment who I would just like to ask to come and tell you a little bit about their experiences, and then we're very happy to answer any questions you might have. So this is Danielle and Rania, and I'd like to thank them very much for giving up their afternoon to come along. So ladies, do you want to just tell us a little bit about...
Hi guys, so I just started my GDPP, that's the 5+1. I myself completed my undergrad specialist sporty at UWS. So transitioning from a university to ACAP was a huge difference, but it was a positive difference. I really found that ACAP was, you feel like you're in a family. Everyone works together, teachers are great, they're there to help you grow. So I'm also looking to articulate into my masters, so I'm trying to get that D average, so fingers crossed. But no, I really loved ACAP. It's pretty great. Huge positive difference from UWS to ACAP. Yeah.
Thank you, Danielle.
So I started my undergrad training in Macquarie, and I had a bit too much fun partying and didn't get the marks, and I went off and I did my postgraduate diploma here at UWS as well, and I ended up taking some time off psychology because I wasn't sure if it's what I wanted to do, and it is the kind of career where you give everything. But what I did do is I threw myself into getting as much experience and volunteered, and I built up a portfolio of work in the psychology field. With that, and I recovered from all my, I don't know if I want to go back studying, I'm an academic, blah blah blah. I reapplied to go to ACAP, and I got into the professional psychology degree, the GPD, whatever it is. and then I was lucky enough to get the distinction average, and I've now safely planted into my second year of the clinical masters. And from my experience, hopping back onto the study bandwagon was really overwhelming for me, and I genuinely doubted whether I could do it. But the staff there are probably the most passionate and dedicated people, and I'd go knock on the door and go blah blah blah, and sometimes I come so many times they'd say, just stop worrying, go away. Or so it's a real very approachable, and also they're smaller classes, so there's 25 people ish in the cohort altogether, and the array of students that ACAP accepts in. It keeps it interesting, all different kind of backgrounds as well. So you're always learning, not just from the staff, but from the students. And it's getting a really good reputation. So I'm proud to say that I will graduate with the clinical masters at ACAP.
Yay! That's awesome. Excellent. Thank you, Danielle. Do any of you have any questions for us? I'm more than happy to try and field any.
How many more units, once you finish, say, the graduate professional, say you can articulate to the masters of clinical, how many more units would you have to do?
So basically the units...
Like how much credit do you get?
You get complete credit for this, you get complete credit for this, and you get complete credit for this. You can apply for credit for these. You have to do a couple of additional assessment tasks in order to get two essays. I mean, it's not that horrendous.
So you have 3 months to do them.
Yeah, that's right. So potentially you can get credit for all of these units. The only one you can't get credit for, because you won't have done it before, is this one. So essentially, so what happens is, well, we're about to finalise grades for trimester 2. So at the beginning of trimester 3, we kind of look at how's everybody travelling. We're going to speak to all of the current GDPP students and say, okay, look, we think you're on track. We're not so sure, blah, 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 whatever it happens to be. Then once we get the final grades at the end of the year, we can work out the final average. Then people are in a position to say, well, yes, we can offer you a place in the masters, or no, we can't. Do you want to take it? And we can offer you one. They've got until I think it's like early February to do the essays for these two. Then we have a look and go, put all the credit into the master's program. So basically, all they've got left to do then is they start their research project 1 in trimester 1 of the 5th year. So they're like a trimester behind in the research project. But then they follow the course. They do the coursework unit with the master's students, and then I think most of your group, Danielle, are probably going to be finished their placements by the end of this year, aren't they?
And then dissertations are.
Yeah, but technically you've got like an extra trimester to get everything done. So you would normally take 7 trimesters rather than 6 trimesters to finish finish the degree. So it's a pretty good deal. I mean, you could apply, you could do a 5th year somewhere else and apply to the Masters, for example. The problem can be that in terms of credit or recognition of prior learning can be that it can't always match up the way the unit was taught in another institution and the way it was taught in ours, and unless it matches up completely, we can't give you credit. So
it's very hard to see equivalence.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Any other questions? No? Overwhelmed you with information? It's probably been a long day, has it? Heads will be swimming. All right, well, thank you very much for coming along. Lovely to see you all. And do, as I say, feel free to contact the student recruitment folk if you have any questions.